Hi, gang. I'm Lisa McClendon at the Bremner Editing Center at the University of Kansas School of Journalism. And today we're going to talk about the editing process. What do editors do and how does that process work? So we'll spend the next few minutes kind of going over the process, and hopefully by the end of it, you'll have a good understanding of what editing is and what editors do. Okay, then. This was originally recorded for KSPA 2020 virtual conference. Good stuff for our Kansas high school aspiring journalists. Good for you guys. All right, we're going to talk about what editors do, why we need them, how this process works. And let me just say at the beginning here, before you get a tattoo, before you carve something in stone, please proofread it. It'll make you look better. There are basically three aspects of editing that you're going to do in journalism. And we'll start with kind of the obvious ones, the micro editing skills. And these are, spelling, grammar, punctuation, choosing the right word, making sure you have the right there or the right its or your, that kind of thing. Fixing typos. If there's a sentence that's really convoluted, an editor will fix that, untangle it, simplify it somehow, make it a little bit easier for the reader to understand. And the same with cliches in writing, or if it's something, a phrase that's really overused or something like that, an editor may freshen that up just a little bit. So that's kind of at the sentence, word and sentence level here. Bigger picture things that editors are going to look at are structure and flow. So how is a story structured? Does one idea flow into the next really easily? Are there holes in a story? Is something missing? Do we really need to contact somebody for a quote that hasn't been contacted? Is there a really important piece of information that has been left out of the story? Are there questions that readers are going to have as they read that aren't answered anywhere in the story? So an editor reading a story is going to go, I wonder why. And if that I wonder is never answered in the story, then you've got a question there for the writer. An editor's also going to check the facts. You're going to check people's names and numbers and dates and basically anything you can check it. Check it. It's easy to do that now with so much information online. It's not like you're having to go look stuff up in a book most of the time. So do the fact checking. You're also thinking about taste and sensitivity. Is something maybe potentially offensive to your readers? Is it just kind of in bad taste? Is there a joke that's made in bad taste? Or is there too much gruesome detail in a crime story? That kind of thing. So yeah, you don't want anything to be biased. You don't want anything to be offensive to a segment of your readership. And you don't want anything to be overly, gratuitously gross or anything like that. And then you're going to go with the ethical and legal aspects. Have you libeled anybody? Even if you haven't libeled anybody, have you invaded someone's privacy, or is it just a detail that people don't necessarily need to know? I mean, there's a lot of things that it's legal to publish, but it's not necessarily ethical to do it. So an editor will go, do we really want to run this? And that is this aspect of editing. Then when you go beyond the copy to edit, we're thinking about things like display type. So headlines and subheads and tweets and photo captions and summaries and all the sort of the peripheral type that goes with a package. So that kind of stuff too. How does it look? How does it look on a page? How does it look on your web page? You may have to do navigability stuff on your website. That kind of thing a lot of times falls to editors. What goes first? That's your news judgment. Okay, so an editor may be called on to say, this one's really more important. Let's put this one at the top. You may need to create or at least edit graphics that go with the news. A lot of times nobody edits a graphic because everybody thinks somebody else has edited it and therefore no one has fact checked it or even checked it for typos. So editing graphics may come in there too. And then kind of bigger, more not necessarily word kind of things, but like, can you manage copy flow? Can you meet your deadlines? Can you make it so that we don't have three big things all coming due at the same time, because we're going to stagger that so that we can get them out in a timely fashion? And also working well with writers. You can't just barge into a story and change a whole bunch of stuff. A lot of times you're going to have to ask a writer questions about something or make suggestions for how a story could be better, without making the writer feel bad about something, because it's not going to be very productive and you're not going to get the result that you're looking for, which is a better, more complete story for the readers if the writer gets their back up and then kind of digs in on something. So tact and diplomacy are really, really important skills for editors to have, really important here. And most of you have probably been on the writing side too. And think about that. I mean, remember how it is to be edited. You want your work to be the best it can be, and that's an editor's job. But it's also, it kind of hurts sometimes if you screwed something up. So when you're on the editing end, remember how that kind of felt when like, oh, crud, I can't believe I misspelled that word. Or, oh, gee, I can't believe I left that piece of information out. It's just we're all on the same team and we're all working to make our publication as good as it can be for our readers. We're serving our readers, we're serving our audience. That is the ultimate goal here, and we're all working together for that. Okay, here's just a few examples of why we need editors and what a good editor here would have caught. So we've got our asymmetric jacket, which I know what they meant, but that is not what they said there. Even professional newspaper editors sometimes mess up affect and effect, but you don't want it in 60-point type on your front page. You don't want to just forget Kansas on a map of hurricanes. That would be bad. We go from Texas to Oklahoma to Nebraska. Where did Kansas go? Not cool there. Not cool, AP. This one's a little bit more subtle, I think. You've got your headline here about Prince Harry accused of breaking military rules by wearing a beard. The guy in the photo does not have a beard, and he's not Prince Harry. Now, if you look over to the right side, that's half of Prince Harry, but we've got Prince William here in the middle. So, figure out how to start your video. I mean, obviously this is a video and this is a thumbnail here of the video. So maybe start it like a half a second later when Prince Harry is fully in the frame. So your headline works with the art here. So it works with that image instead of people going, what? Because that doesn't help anybody. You never want your readers going, what? That is not the question you want from them. The questions that you want from your readers are like, wow, how did they get that story? That's the kind of question you want, not like, what does this mean? Why didn't they tell us blah, blah, blah? Those kind of things, those are bad questions. The good questions are, gosh, I wonder what they're going to do next. That's a good question. Okay, and I put this in giant, boldface, red type for a reason. Do not assume, ask, okay? There are a lot of things that as an editor, you can fix on your own. Okay, you can fix comma splices, you can fix typos, you can fact check names and spell people's names right, and all that kind of stuff. But there's a lot of things where, okay, so say someone's name is spelled 2 different ways in a story and you can't find them somewhere. Okay, don't just assume the first spelling is correct. Often it is not. Often they typo the first one and spell it correctly the rest of the way through. Okay, so don't assume that that one is correct. If there is either a missing digit or an improperly placed comma in a number, in a long number, don't just assume, oh, I need to move this comma, or, oh, there's missing a 0 at the end here. You ask about this, because no editor likes to let an error through. But what's even worse than letting an error through is putting one in where there wasn't one before. Okay, and that happens when editors assume something and they don't ask about it. So, just don't make those assumptions. Do not assume, oh, they meant this. Oh, it must be this. Oh, I'm pretty sure it's this. Pretty sure is not good enough. Pretty sure is never good enough. Okay, be sure, be certain about something. And how do you get to be certain? You ask. Or, I mean, you can look it up too sometimes, but if you can't find it by looking it up, there are some things that you're going to have to ask a writer about. So don't make that assumption. Don't insert an error into someone's story. Ask about it. Ask them. Okay, so like, what do you do then when you're starting to edit. Okay, so we know kind of what we're looking at in terms of micro editing and macro editing, and then the peripheral kinds of editing. But what about when you actually sit down to do it? Okay, and what I tell students here at KU to do is just read the story through first. Okay, I mean, literally sit on your hands if you have to, so you don't make any changes in that story. Okay, read through it and figure out what it's about. Okay, and I also tell them during that first, and you can just kind of skim it. You don't have to like read every single word, but skim through it fairly quickly so you have an idea of, okay, what's the story about? Where's it going? What's the news here? Okay, maybe jot down a little headline that you might think of for that story. Okay, then when you've gotten kind of an idea of what the story is about, then you want to actually start editing. And the best way to do a really thorough edit on something is to go through it twice. Okay, and one is that macro editing where you're looking for the big picture stuff, you're looking for the structure, you're looking for the flow. You are, making sure that it's not offensive, that you're not missing any big questions or missing a source that should be in there. The other edit is the picky edit, the cleanup, that it does this follow AP style. Have I fixed all the typos? Or all the commas and apostrophes in the right place? Those kind of things. So we have the affect instead of the effect where we need it. Now, I just said one is this and one is this. Whichever order works for you as an editor to do this in, do it that way. Figure out, do I need to do that picky cleanup first so I can pay attention to the big stuff afterwards? Or do I want to do the big picture edit so I can get an idea of the structure of the story and then go back and do the picky cleanup? It doesn't matter which way you do it. Some editors are going to prefer one way over the other, and that is fine. Okay, so as long as you're giving the macro stuff your full attention and the micro stuff your full attention on a pass, it's okay to do it whatever way you want. So when you're done with that, then you want to write the headlines, write the cut lines, write the summaries, write the tweets if you're the person who's doing that. And now when you're writing the headline, go back and think about that headline you kind of jotted down on your first pass through. Okay. And if the headline you come up with after you've edited the story is really different from your first impression and you didn't make a lot of structural changes to the story, excuse me, then maybe you've got a news problem here. And sometimes that's a sign, if your headline's really different, that maybe the news isn't where it needs to be. Maybe your first impression of the story gave you a different idea of what the news was than after you'd edited it and you're looking kind of at the lead and the nut graph and going, okay, this must be the headline. Go back and check again if they're really, really different. And make sure that, yeah, the news is pretty far up, that you haven't buried the lead somewhere, that kind of thing. And then you're going through all the presentation and packaging. And this is going to be, putting the photos with it, any graphics with it, inserting links into the story that's on your website, all that kind of tweeting it out, sharing it however you would normally share it. You go ahead and you do that. Okay, let's take a minute to talk just about leads, because people get a little proprietary about their leads, and that's okay. That's a good thing. But as I mentioned before, if you've got the news pretty late in the story, that's a buried lead, and that's probably a structural problem there. You don't have to cram all the news into the very first paragraph of the story, but you want to give your readers a pretty good idea of what the news is fairly early on in the story. I mean, it's okay to have an anecdotal lead for 2 or 3 paragraphs, short paragraphs, and then a nut graph that's going to tell everybody what's going on. That's fine. But if it's not till like the second to the last paragraph in the story, a lot of people aren't going to last that long. They're going to bail because they don't understand what the point is. And if you've hidden the point from them for too long, that's not good. Also, some people like to go a little crazy and get every single one of the 5 W's into the lead. That's not always the best choice. It's not always the worst choice either. Sometimes if you've got a really straightforward lead, all 5 W's is fine. But sometimes people start with on Wednesday, blah, blah, blah. Okay, let me just tell you right now, the when is never the most important part of the news. Okay, Who did what, why? Those are the most important W's of the news. Those should be in the lead. So if you ever find yourself starting or editing a story that starts with yesterday or last week or on Friday, change that lead. Okay, because that is not the most important part. But again, this is something where you're probably going to want to work with the writer to fix the lead. And you need to be able to articulate to the writer pretty clearly, why does this lead need to be changed? Not just, I don't really like the way it sounds. That is not a good reason. You've started with the when, let's put the who and the why first. That's a good reason. Or, you've got 6 paragraphs of background before you get to the nut graph. Can we tighten this up to like 2 little short paragraphs in the nut graph and then kind of come back to the person in the anecdotal lead? That's okay too. But have a good reason for doing this. A good reason being, we don't want our readers to be confused. We want to get to the point so our readers know what this story is about. We don't want to make it sound boring by starting a lead with last week, because that is not very timely. So have a good reason about this. As an editor, people that you're editing may not have written something the way you would have written it. That is not in itself wrong, okay? There's lots of things that I've edited where I wouldn't have written it that way, but I leave it alone because it's not wrong and it's clear and it's their voice. So you've got a fine line to walk there with some of this sometimes. Accuracy. This is so important, especially right now. That really our credibility is all we have. And so we have to make double and triple sure that everything in our stories is accurate. Are the facts right? Are names, dates, years, titles, names of businesses, etc. correct? Is every factual information, every piece of factual information, is it sourced? Is it attributed? Okay. Sometimes that's a problem. You can't just throw numbers into a story without saying where they came from. And please check people's names. Even if you think you know their name, even if the writer has marked it CQ, just check it again. Just check it and help them out, because people really hate it when you mess up their names, because the thing that they think when you don't spell their name right is, what else have they screwed up here? What else didn't they get right here? So be really careful about that, because our credibility is all we have. It really is. And we need our readers to trust us to be accurate. And that's a large part of that is an editor's job. All right, with structure, what you're looking at is, getting the news first, like we talked about. If it's not absolutely first, there's a nut graph pretty high up and pretty clear. Are we flowing logically from one idea to the next? Have we answered all the unanswered questions? Have we included comment and quotes from everybody who should be included here? Okay. And then the display type. Okay, you're writing the headlines, cut lines, the summaries, the social posts, that kind of thing, even news alerts. And these should not be an afterthought. This may be the only part that people read. You know how many people skim through and just read the headlines? All right, so those are really important. Spend some time with them. Make sure you're telling the story accurately. Make sure you're selling the story a little bit, making it interesting, piquing people's curiosity, and make sure you don't have any mistakes in it. That's really important too. And very last step of the process is when you're proofing. And this is really, what you're doing mostly on print, because once you publish something on the web, you can actually go back and clean that up. But I'm thinking more of like if you're doing a yearbook, a magazine, something that you're printing, you're going back through it one more time to check all the details and things like that. So in a nutshell, that is what editing is. This is what editors do. And I wish you the best of luck in all your editing.